I'm Mike Sheridan, and this is The Delve. Director Brennan, how are you, sir?
Hello, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for taking the time. How
Yeah,
are you doing, sir? How is the family? Is everybody okay?
everybody's fine. Yeah, we have our vaccinations, and so my wife and I, and our children and grandchildren. The grandchildren don't have the vaccinations, but the children do. So yeah, we're thankfully we avoided getting contracting COVID.
So it's the past 15 months or so been quite quiet for you comparatively. Have you just been at home like everybody else?
Yeah, I haven't traveled much at all. I haven't traveled to Ireland. I usually, get to Ireland at least once a year. Haven't been able to do that, but yeah, we've been sequestered here and outside of Washington D.C. Things are slowly opening back up, restaurants and other things, and so hopefully the same will be taking place in Ireland very soon.
Really, really enjoyed the book. I thought it was beautifully written, but also very easy to read. It's one of those books that's easy to digest, given the kind of volume of information that you're putting across in the book. I found it totally fascinating. But one of my favorite parts of the book, I think, was how you wrote about your father, Owen, which is the most Irish name ever, Owen Brennan,
You
ridiculously
pronounce it
Irish name.
correctly, Owen. Yes, exactly.
Owen Brennan from Roscommon, and I found it fascinating that you said your patriotism came via your father, who was, of course, an Irishman from Roscommon.
Well, my father emigrated from Ireland in 1948 when he was 28 years old, and then became a naturalized U.S. citizen. And he instilled in my brother, sister, and myself at a very early age just how special it was to be an American citizen. That people like himself, come from far and wide to take advantage of the opportunities, the freedom, and the liberty of this country. And he said that too frequently Americans who are citizens by birth take that very special privilege and honor of being an American citizen for granted and told us never to do that. So again, it was a sense of patriotism, a tremendous affinity for everything Irish at the same time. But it's what I think really contributed to my decision to spend my professional career working on behalf of the American people in the U.S. government.
And you grew up in a very much a working class area in Jersey, is that right?
Yeah, so it was blue collar. My father, who was a farrier, a blacksmith in Ireland, and when he came over to the States, he adapted and became a pipe fitter with construction in New York. But it was a very much a working class neighborhood. Went to Catholic schools, elementary schools, and high school, and so it was a hardscrabble northern New Jersey town, but very much enjoyed it, and it was a tremendous, friends and family life.
Is there something about working class towns, or what I suppose you call it blue collar in America? Because you talk in the book about seeing this guy who's a few years older than you, walking up and down the street dressed in a suit, going to work, having his briefcase, who became a future director of the FBI. So what was it about that area that you grew up in, or is it a working class thing maybe that just made people kind of really want to achieve?
Well, yeah, many of the children, and certainly my neighborhood, when we went to college, we were the first individuals in our families who had that opportunity. And so I do think that given that our parents had struggled to put us into school and help send us to college, we really tried to, I think, achieve whatever types of academic and professional success we could as a way to pay tribute to the sacrifices that our parents made for us. So yes, Louis Freeh, who was a former director of the FBI, went to the same elementary and high school that I did. And I saw him going back and forth to work and didn't realize to law school and didn't realize that he one day would become the director of the FBI, just like I didn't realize that one day I would become the director of CIA. So in the same street, we had two directors of US government agencies grow up.
Those two schools, the elementary school and the high school, have some serious boasting rights, right? Two directors of national agencies in there. I want to talk just about initially when you decided to join the CIA. after seeing the ad? It kind of felt like, or seemed like it was more of a whim. You kind of seen something, an ad for the Central Intelligence Agency. You weren't quite sure what it was about, but you applied anyway. What did you think you would be doing when you applied for that, when you first applied for that job?
Well, it was a mixture of having a sense of patriotism and wanting to do something on behalf of my country, but also in search of a job and a profession. And so I did see an ad in the New York Times when I was going to school one day. The CIA had placed looking for some men and women to join the ranks. And so I went on to graduate school and submitted my application to the CIA. And thankfully, they were willing to take a chance on me. I had already spent some time overseas. I went to school in Cairo. I traveled through Southeast Asia a bit. And so I think they felt that foreign experience and my Arabic language would have been very useful on the operational front. And so when I joined the agency, they had hoped that I was going to go into the operational side, conducting espionage overseas. But pretty soon after I joined the agency, I found that the analytic work was much more in keeping with my interests, as well as maybe my strengths. So I shifted off to the analytic side of the CIA pretty early on, and then bounced back and forth throughout the course of my career at the agency between operations, analysis, management, and other things. But one of the things about the CIA that I found so attractive is that there are many different opportunities to work in the agency doing different types of work, whether it be operational, analytical, and there's scientific and technical work as well. So I just didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how long I was going to stay at the agency. I wound up my first part of my career staying for 25 years and then went back as director for 4 years.
Are there any kind of preconceived notions about the CIA? Maybe that not necessarily that you had per se, but that are out there in popular culture. So like, I'm in Dublin in Ireland. For me, I hear CIA and I think, oh, it's Jack Ryan, it's a Tom Clancy novel. Was there any kind of preconceived notions like that on your part, or are there notions like that there now that you're like, that's not the case at all? Or are there some that are maybe the case?
Well, I think it runs the gamut from a lot of the movies and stories that are out there about the glamorous life of a CIA officer overseas, as well as all the risk-taking that they're involved in. And some of that certainly is true as far as taking risks and traveling around the globe. There's also a lot of tedious work that goes on inside of CIA's corridors in terms of just trying to stitch together bits and pieces of information so we understand what's happening in the world. So back then, 1980 was when I joined. There was a lot of press reporting about the CIA, some of it factual, some of it very bogus. The same is true today. And one of the biggest challenges I have had throughout my career and continue to is try to separate the wheat from the chaff in the minds of a lot of people who think about the CIA. Because if you were to read a lot of the criticisms of CIA that really are not based on fact at all, you would think that the CIA is a bunch of killers and murderers, and that's not the case. The CIA has some really outstanding people who are doing some very, very important work, not just for the United States, but also for global peace and stability. But there's just a lot of rumors that are out there that continue to circulate about what the CIA is involved in.
I know one of the biggest issues that you had early on in management in the CIA to some degree was that communication between government departments. And it's like anything in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, even where something like, I was looking at something on the Zodiac killer recently where there was no communications between the different police departments and he got away. And you look at something on a much bigger, more horrific scale like 9/11, whereas if maybe the agencies were speaking to each other a little bit more coherently or a little bit more often, that something like that could have been avoided.
Yeah, well, it is a challenge because a lot of the work that goes into the intelligence profession, law enforcement, and security is very sensitive. And so you want to make sure that you're going to be protecting the secrets that you have, as well as the privacy of citizens. And so there are different components of the US government that were trying to protect those secrets, but it was to the detriment, I think, of protecting our overall security. And so prior to 9/11, the FBI and CIA were not as collaborative as they should have been. Even within CIA, a lot of different components would not share information with one another because, again, they were trying to protect the identities of individuals who were working with the CIA. They're trying to protect these very sensitive sources, technical and human sources. So what we have to do is to find a proper balance between ensuring that the secrets will remain secret, but at the same time, providing information to those other organizations and people who have a responsibility to prevent these types of horrific attacks from taking place.
At a certain point then as well, you begin giving the daily briefings or what bi-daily briefings, whatever it is, to this sitting president. I think the first president you gave them to was H.W. Bush. And then obviously went on with Bill Clinton and President Obama and such. At a certain point, just purely on a personal level, are you sitting in the Oval Office or wherever you're doing these briefings, and does it feel a little bit surreal to be sitting across from the Commander-in-Chief?
It was very surreal. As we talked before, here's a kid from a New Jersey blue-collar neighborhood, and there I am in the Oval Office talking to the most powerful person in the world about intelligence matters. And there were more than one occasion where I had to pinch myself to make sure that it was real. I just found that George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, they were all so good and kind, welcoming new people into the administration, into the White House. They put me at ease. But I must say, it's a very intimidating experience. And the first time I went in there, I could actually hear my knees knocking and my teeth chattering because of the nervousness that I had.
Is there a common thread maybe amongst all of the men that you saw, that you noticed kind of early on? Like people said that about President Obama, that he's just so confident, that it's just this, like, he kind of just uses this confidence.
Well, yeah, President Obama has this very calm demeanor, even when there are some really serious issues and challenges that are raised. I was very much admiring of his ability to very calmly absorb information and digest it and then make some decisions. But I think all the presidents that I served, they shared a great sense of commitment to the national security of the country. They put the national security and international security above personal and partisan agendas. I think they all had tremendous professional integrity. It's a very, very difficult job. It's really requires a tremendous amount of focus as well as interaction with the experts. And I really felt that at least the presidents that I served really did their utmost to carry out the responsibilities as best they could.
And then you became kind of Senior Counterterrorism Advisor to President Obama. And something I found was fascinating, and I think certainly people outside of the US won't realize, is that there's not a whole lot of money in government. If you're going to work for the government, there's not a huge amount of money in it. And it can be a struggle, particularly if you're coming from the private sector into the public sector, into work in government, even though, you know, as Senior Counterterrorism Advisor, you're working in the White House. You know, the Oval Office is literally above where your office is. But it can. Was that a personal struggle to some degree? Was there some adjustment there, or was that pretty much just that? No, this is an honor, and it's a yes no matter what.
Well, it was always an honor, and I served in the government for 33 years. And living in the Washington D.C. area, just like Dublin, it's a high cost of living area. And working for the government, you're not going to become rich. You shouldn't. There's tremendous psychic reward, and you have a great feeling that you're contributing to, you know, your country and your fellow citizens. But it can be a struggle, and there are sacrifices. And so I had to rely on my wife's support. Thankfully, I had have a wife for over 42 years that was able to keep the home fires burning. And a lot of CIA officers require the love and support of a spouse or parents or siblings to help them out, because the hours are long, the pay is not enormous. And so it's really a commitment that you make to your professional career. And when I had the opportunity to serve at the White House, when President Obama asked me to rejoin the government after I had retired the first time, there was no way I could say no. Even though I knew that I was going to go back into that government service, make less money than in the private sector, and have a lot more hours, a lot more responsibility. But it's something that I think really drives a lot of individuals to do what they can, because you know, our lives are relatively short, and to the extent that we can help others during the course of our lives, we can do it. And I found that work in the government allowed me to do that.
but your wife was a huge admirer of President Obama. You kind of talk about that too. Were there moments where President Obama maybe pulled her aside for a moment and just told her that you appreciated that, you weren't going to be home a lot of weekends, you're going to miss a lot of recitals, whatever that is?
Yes, and there were times when my wife and I'd be invited to dinners at the White House, maybe for visiting dignitaries or whatever. And there were several times that President Obama intentionally had Kathy, my wife, sit next to him at the dinner, so he had an opportunity to talk to her and to express his appreciation. It helped me a lot because it was a struggle at home to, I'd get up very early. I wouldn't get home sometimes till 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and then have to do the same thing the following day. And he just told Kathy just how much he appreciated, my service and my work, and how much he appreciated her doing everything possible to support me. And given that she was such a huge admirer of President Obama, it really helped me at home after those dinner conversations that she had.
You kind of talk about in the book also how when President Obama knows he's going to see you, or if you need to see him urgently, it's not going to be good news when the Senior Counterterrorism Advisor wants to speak to you. Were those moments difficult, or was it purely so straightforward that you just have to convey whatever news or whatever information or whatever intel you have to the president so he can make a decision?
Well, sometimes it was, I don't want to say routine, but we were used to having to deal with a lot of issues, such as, impending terrorist attacks and the actions we had to take against them. But there were times when it was very, very difficult to bring bad news. And I relate in the book how I had to tell President Obama about this awful shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, that resulted in the deaths of over 20 young children. It was a slaughter. And I was the one who told him that. And we were both in shock. And as fathers, we really felt it quite emotionally. And so it was those moments when I think the humanity of what really is involved in terms of, these types of crises and how it affects us, it really hit home. So, but usually when I would be coming up to his office, he knew that I was either going to be asking him to make a very difficult decision on something, or was going to bring him, bad news about some type of terrorist attack that had taken place.
And one of those decisions was to give a go to a mission involving Osama bin Laden. And you say how Obama, and I know he's spoken himself about it over years as well, where he said it was 40% sure, or he was given intel that they were 40% sure that Osama bin Laden was in this cave. And Obama said, well, it's 40% more than we've had previously, so we have to go for it. You were in that situation room as that was going down. Were you just purely concentrated on what was happening, on with the information being relayed to you by where the Navy SEALs were, all of that, or was there any sense of the magnitude of that moment and what was going on?
Well, it was really deep into the details, because for months leading up to that operation, I was working very closely with the CIA, with the special forces and the U.S. military and President Obama about how we're going to ensure that this was going to be a successful mission. And so while I was watching and observing what was going on, I was thinking about all of the things that were going to happen and needed to happen for it to be a success. And the very difficult points, such as getting our folks out of country after the operation took place, after the assault on the compound. I was very, very concerned about the helicopter ride back into Afghanistan. It was 90-minute helicopter ride over Pakistani terrain, difficult terrain. And the Pakistanis knew something was going on. They had already scrambled some fighters. Their radar was up. And I was concerned that even if bin Laden was killed, if one of those helicopters was shot down or crashed, and we lost a dozen or 2 dozen of our U.S. SEALs, that would have been just a tragic event. So it was a lot of white knuckle moments during that period of time. And then after the operation was a success, we had various responsibilities. I had to call the Saudis and tell them that we got bin Laden and see whether or not they wanted his body, and they said no. So there was just a lot of orchestration of activities throughout the course of that day, as there was in the days, weeks, and months prior to it.
And obviously, there's not a huge amount you can tell your partner as a CIA official or as somebody who's working in government. Was that one where you just really wanted to tell your wife, Grace, what was going on, what was happening, or was it just, again, the blinkers are on? I just need to focus here.
Well, she knew that something was up because I was spending even more hours at the White House in the weeks prior to the operation. But Kathy had been used to, over the years, knowing that there was something happening, but that I couldn't share any of the details with. And this was one of those occasions. And I said, Kathy, just trust me that this is critically important, and I need to dedicate the time to this. And so once we got bin Laden, it was one of the first phone calls I made was Kathy to tell her to watch President Obama speak to the nation tonight, because that will let you know exactly what I've been involved in over the past number of months. So she respected the confidentiality that I had to abide by. And I didn't want to burden her or others with this secret because we were so concerned that if word ever got out about this, that bin Laden could have escaped that compound and we would have lost our opportunity to get him.
Did anybody mention to you that The Rock had tweeted about what had happened? Kind of vaguely, but The Rock tweeted what had happened. Did that come up at all at any meeting?
No, it wasn't one of the bits of intel that was brought to me. There was a lot of other things that I was told about at the time, but the fact that The Rock tweeted was not one of them.
So then you become, at a certain point at the end of the first term, start of the second term, you become the director of the CIA. You're nominated to become the director of the CIA. Was there any point that you were maybe hesitant to take it? Like, obviously you have to talk to your family, you have to talk to your partner. But was there any part of you that thought, 30 odd years in government, maybe that's enough?
Yeah, well, at the end of President Obama's first term, I was exhausted physically, emotionally, because of the tremendous, challenge that position had. And so I was planning to retire from the government once more. But when President Obama asked me to be the director of CIA, I knew that I couldn't say no. And so when I talked to Kathy about it, she was planning on our retirement as well. She also said, you can't say no. Because by then, she was totally bought on to the Barack Obama, bandwagon and told me that I needed to take it. And so there was a momentary, hesitance I had, but leading the women and men of CIA, the organization that I served in for 25 years, it was, I felt, would be the capstone of my professional career.
What was the most difficult part of being back in the CIA and leading the CIA?
Well, there were a number of things. I was dealing with a number of issues with our congressional oversight committees, and I found that some of the partisan waters on both sides of the political aisle, and the Democrats and Republicans, really were quite challenging. And I always tried to speak very forthrightly to members of Congress, and sometimes individuals who had their own agendas disagreed with me and my views. But I felt an obligation to make sure that I represented the CIA as best and as honestly as I could. Also, when I was at CIA, I reorganized the agency. I really felt that an organization of 70 years that basically had stayed in its own organizational structure throughout that time needed to make some adjustments. And so I overhauled it, which created quite a bit of churn inside the agency. A lot of people are wedded to the established organizational structures that they had grown up in. But I really felt an obligation as somebody who had served in the CIA for so long to position the CIA as best I could to deal with the challenges of the future, not of the past. And given the tremendous technological changes that have taken place, the emergence of cyber and the digital environments, just how much more challenging the work of intelligence agencies has been, I felt that we needed to do a better job of integrating capabilities inside of the agency so that we could empower one another to carry out our mission. So that I took as a personal challenge, and we restructured it, and thankfully that restructuring stayed after I left the agency.
And you mentioned cyber attacks there, and I'm not sure how much attention you pay to the Irish news. I know you follow RT, the national broadcaster here.
Oh, the health industry. I know.
The health, yeah, the HSE. Yeah. There was a very I think they've handled it very well, to be fair, but there was a devastating attack on the HSE, a cyber attack, and it was held to ransom. We seem to be coming out the other side of it now, fingers crossed. But do you see instances like that becoming more and more frequent? And is that modern warfare in another way as well? Is that what it's going to become evolved to?
Well, I do think it's a global phenomenon now that there are so many elements, groups that are pursuing these different types of malware, ransomware, other things in order to take advantage of the digital environment. And I don't think we in the United States or even the international community have been aggressive enough in terms of trying to go after a lot of these hackers. And I do think we need to do a better job of trying to reduce the vulnerabilities that we have, but also to have the ability to recover very quickly from these attacks. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the investments in cybersecurity have been less than what needs to be, because as Ireland recently experienced with that ransomware attack, it can have devastating effects. And there are a lot of individuals out there, and a lot of them are being supported by the Russian security and intelligence services, unfortunately, engaged in these types of criminal activities. And I do think that there needs to be more of an international consensus about how to deal with it. And I hope that President Biden, as he talks with the other leaders of the G7, will make this a very prominent issue on their agenda so that they can work more collaboratively together to go after these cyber criminals, but also do what we need to do in order to prevent these attacks in the future.
Is there anything, and I'm going to let you go soon, very much appreciate the time, sir. Is there anything, if at all, that keeps you up at night? I know President Obama has spoke with the transition with the last administration that North Korea was something that, you know, if he was going to stress or worry about something, and plenty of things to stress and worry about when you're the leader of the free world, but that was the one thing that kept them up at night. Is there one thing now out of government that keeps you up at night?
Well, you know, now that I'm out of government, I don't have to be responsible for dealing with a lot of these challenges, whether we're talking about terrorism, nuclear proliferation. But I do think in this cyber and digital world, given that the world is so interconnected and we are increasingly dependent on that digital environment for virtually everything we do in terms of finance, education, communication, information flow. And it can be very much disrupted by those who have those nefarious intents. Looking out over time, and when I think about my children and grandchildren's future, I am very concerned about the effects of climate change in the future, what it's going to mean for rising seas that are going to push coastal populations inland, how it's going to lead to migration across borders, how that's going to have economic dislocations, political instability. It's very insidious, the threat. As climate change evolves, it looks like it's happening very slowly, but when you look at the life of the Earth, it's happening very quickly. And another generation or two, I think, are really going to have difficult times unless we reverse some of these very, very disturbing trends, such as in carbon emissions and other types of development. So I am worried about that more sort of pervasive and insidious threat of climate change.
And final question, is there anything that would bring you back into government? Is there a role? Or are you enjoying retirement way too much?
Well, as I said, I've served for 33 years in the government, and I spend my time now lecturing at my alma maters, Fordham University in New York and University of Texas at Austin, and talking to students and encouraging them to pursue careers in national security, law enforcement, giving back to this country. And so I enjoy that a lot. And I think looking out in the future, I think my primary role is going to be spending time with my family that I wasn't able to spend with them earlier, but also getting young Americans and young people everywhere to really be thinking more about what they can do to contribute to the stability, the prosperity, and the peace and security of their countries in this world. So no, I have no intention of returning to government service. I'm enjoying this second retirement, and hopefully it'll be my last retirement.
Director Brennan, I can't thank you enough for your time. The book is really superb. I can't recommend it enough.
Thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate talking to you and to people of Ireland, and just a shout out to folks in Roscommon and Lecaro and those areas there. I look forward to coming back to sometime this year.